go!
Welcome everyone to another episode of the S.O.A.P. My name is Daniel. I'm joined by Arthur and Cav. This episode we're going to be talking a bit about Warcraft, the original games, the World of Warcraft series, and its latest expansion, Battle for Azeroth. Arthur, can you tell us a little bit about what Warcraft is in general?
Warcraft started in 1994 with Warcraft 1, the RTS. And then literally a year later, there was Warcraft 2, another RTS, which was kind of the same game, but not quite. Looked a lot better.
So what was Warcraft about?
It is the war between orcs and humans. At least in Warcraft 1. Warcraft 2 introduced some more races, namely elves and dwarves, and trolls, and ogres, and a few other things. But essentially it's like a high epic fantasy series that's kind of like a mishmash of all the fantasy tropes you're kind of already aware of, but just notched up a little bit. Like everything's a little bit grander, a little bit bigger, a little bit more epic. That's the general idea.
How did you feel when you first played Warcraft 1, when you loaded it up, and then Warcraft 2 straight after it? How did you feel? What was the impression that you got from it?
Well, I think it was the first fantasy. I think it's the first fantasy RTS I remember playing. And I played Warcraft 1 very briefly because I basically played it near the end of its life. And then I randomly went to one of my friends' houses, like one of my family friends. And they, of course, had a slightly better computer than we had access to at the time. And they already had Warcraft 2. And that was really the game that pushed me into Warcraft territory, because from then on I basically loved it. Started playing the Orc campaign straight away because I naturally always gravitate towards non-human, basically anything that isn't human in any fantasy realm. Because I generally find playing good old humans a little bit boring, so the Orcs were slightly more interesting.
I can definitely relate to that. For me, the whole thing about fantasy is something different. Like, I don't want to be myself there. I want to be something that I can't be in real life. So I can definitely relate to that. What blew my mind about the original Warcraft games, going from Warcraft 1 to Warcraft 2, a little bit spoilers for those who haven't played a game from the 90s, but was the ending of Warcraft 1. Essentially, when you played all the different campaigns, you win your campaign. But the overall end of that series was that the orcs won the war. And for me, I was very surprised. Like, for that time, I didn't think it was a normal kind of thing for the bad people to win and to have these consequences. I was kind of living in that cartoon fantasy of good guys always win. So going into Warcraft 2, when they were like, the orcs have won and they've pushed the humans out, and, that whole storyline, for me, that was a huge moment because I hadn't experienced something like that.
Yeah, although mind you, they did partially retcon that because I don't think, the original game, of course, you could play as either side and officially win as either the orcs or humans. But when Warcraft 2 came out, they basically made it that the orcs won the first war because Warcraft 2 is already set when they're sailing toward Lordaeron.
That big opening cinematic with all the boats coming across.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing I remember, obviously, as you said, is the cinematics. I hadn't played any game with such vivid, cinematics and anything like that. So that's the first thing I remember about the old Warcraft games. And I didn't actually start playing mine until I think Warcraft 2 was the first one I played. I didn't play Warcraft 1. I went straight into Warcraft 2. And eventually I moved on to Warcraft 3 and I was hooked. And needless to say, I've been playing Warcraft since then. So, good times.
It's interesting you mentioned the cinematics because Warcraft 3, I remember when they first, announced it, and one of the things for it was the DVD quality cinematics. The quality of the cutscenes and that was so much ahead of everyone else. and it really drew you into that game. And the storyline for Warcraft 3, out of everything that Warcraft's ever done, Warcraft 3 is definitely the place that I hold as its greatest moment. And the cinematics are such an important part of it. From the very opening way that they portrayed the battle between the human and orc soldier to, Grom Hellscream and his battle alongside Thrall against Manaroth. I always get the name wrong.
Yes, Manaroth.
Like, that moment for Grom Hellscream was such a big moment for me that I remember it very clearly to this day. Just don't remember the guy who was fighting. But, they really told a story back then. And for an RTS series, it wasn't so common. You'd have these overarching storylines, but especially in Warcraft 3, you really felt these characters coming out throughout the storyline. And I feel like that's what made those games so great and enabled them to create something like World of Warcraft.
No, I agree. And the Warcraft 3 is basically they're very different to each other. Essentially, Warcraft 1 and 2 are kind of very similar in their design choices. They've essentially got two sides with kind of units that function very, very similarly. I think officially in Warcraft 2, actually, the orcs were slightly better because of Bloodlust. But they functionally are very similar. Warcraft 3 already introduced 4 sides. They were very asymmetric. It had a plot that was actually linear and took you to a particular place. And if you're familiar with it, I mean, by now most people have at least some familiarity with it, but it had the standard Blizzard slightly downer ending, which kind of they became famous for by then already.
Can you tell us a little bit more about when you're saying downer? How do you mean?
Well, they kind of established themselves because they're thematically fairly a little bit darker, right? Even Warcraft, which is high fantasy, has a lot of dark elements in it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But Blizzard, generally speaking, from when they create linear plots and stories, there's a kind of bittersweet. Even when the ending is good, it's a little bit bittersweet. And it's never really 100% good. Because, Warcraft 3, for instance, The Frozen Throne, it essentially ends with Arthas ascending to merge with Nazul to become the Lich King, right?
Yep.
But it ends there. It doesn't imply that there's some great evil or something, this is incredibly bad. It doesn't actually imply anything. But obviously there's something coming that isn't, a positive. It's not a clear-cut good guys win. Which goes back to the whole Warcraft 1 thing where you said earlier where, the orcs won and it's kind of unexpected. Well, they kind of stuck to their guns throughout most of their other series. StarCraft had a very similar thing, and Diablo, they all have those sort of endings. But Warcraft, especially, I don't think there's really... Every single ending, if you can call it that, even to the Warcraft, to the WoW expansions, has that kind of slightly downer ending where you know that maybe things are okay, but there's something bad.
There's something coming, yes. Always.
They've stuck to that really well. I think one of the enjoyable elements of it, because one of the reasons I like it so much is that even in its early days, it always felt like a really fleshed out universe. And for me, that's important for me because I want to feel like I'm part of something big. There's a lot of stuff outside of my character. It's not just me. There's all this other things, political elements and fantasy elements and all this other shit.
Well, I guess that's where World of Warcraft really stepped in, and that's probably why they went that route. World of Warcraft obviously takes that linear storyline, all these great characters, but it enables you to be part of all of that and, experience it with your friends. And when you talk about something big, you're talking about defeating enemies, 40 people online defeating an enemy in that. So vanilla World of Warcraft obviously gives you a lot of that. Cav, can you tell us a little bit about what made World of Warcraft, particularly vanilla World of Warcraft, what it was?
See, for me, the way I see it, I mean, at that point in time, there were some, MMORPGs out there which were, I suppose, good. What was one of them? EverQuest.
Yeah,
Was it EverQuest?
EverQuest was its big competitor, but
Yeah, it
and
was.
Ultima
Yeah,
Online were probably the two.
yeah,
But at that point, MMOs were like a massive niche genre.
yes.
They were very tiny populations generally. Even the really popular ones like EverQuest, comparatively, were did not have that many active players.
Yeah, that's true. And it this is the weird thing, like or not a weird thing, and this is what the thing that drew me to World of Warcraft when it first came out. Because I believe it came out when in November 2004.
Yep.
I started playing it in January 2005. And just at work, people started talking about it, and I thought, wow, I knew it was coming out, but for some reason I wasn't paying attention. And when it hit the market, it took me unawares. But as soon as it came out, as soon as I learned that it was out, I jumped in there and I got hooked straight away. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. I had played, I tried MMORPG, but I just never got into it. But as soon as I jumped into World of Warcraft, I was hooked. Just the way the world was just immense. You could go anywhere and you could do whatever you want. Well, not so much whatever you wanted, but there's so much to do compared to other games. The community, so many people there online that you could interact with. Fantastic. And as I said, got hooked into it, loved it straight away, and the storyline, from the leveling perspective and right up to endgame. I suppose endgame wasn't a big concern of ours back then when you first started with World of Warcraft. But I must say I certainly enjoyed the questing aspect of it. Enjoyed the just the dungeons and everything. It was just so completely different.
Well, the big selling point was that it was streamlined. Like, even though no one goes back to vanilla and thinks it's a streamlined game, but in comparison to EverQuest and Ultima, it was amazingly streamlined. That's why it was like criticized for being like the casual tards like MMO, because there was basically no grinding.
Yeah, correct.
After, yeah. Initially there was, but after the first patch of vanilla, they basically added in so many more quests that it was almost unnecessary to grind.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You could be a casual player, brand new to MMORPGs or RPGs in general, and you could just pick it up straight away. You didn't have the complexities of some of the other games or its competitors at the time, anyway. And it was such a refreshing look at the genre of games that anybody from the casual to the somebody who's more into it could pick it up and still enjoy the game from their point of view, and that just blew up right
Oh,
there.
it blew up. Like, it's a massive hit outside. Like, it blew all their expectations out of the water. Because you know what Blizzard estimated their population was going to be?
No, I'm trying to remember actually.
Well, they thought that they would get something like 100,000
Yes.
in the first 2 years. And it was closer to 2 million.
Correct.
Which they had to like scramble to get more servers online because they did not anticipate anything even remotely like that. Like, that growth was insane. Like, that's why in the beginning there was wait times of like thousands of people because it just didn't have enough servers.
So how did the servers work back when Vanilla WoW came out?
Well, they only had a few servers. They had, of course, their like storage farm. But they basically built more servers. Like, as the game was live, they just did not have the capacity to handle the amount of players and the amount of growth that the game was experiencing. So they basically just had to build entire server farms and just like, here you go, have more and more.
Yeah. It certainly took him unawares as to how popular it became and how quickly it grew.
Well, it was completely unprecedented at the time because, again, this is like, MMOs were a niche genre.
Yeah.
And like they had a predictable like expectation that just was not correct. It's funny because the problem with that is, of course, that that's why every other fucking MMO that came out after that wanted to be WoW, because everyone wanted to repeat that like miracle. It's like never happened again.
Never happened. They tried and tried and tried and still couldn't do it.
Now, with the original servers, they actually divided them up not just by region, so what continent you're playing on or that, but they had different types of servers. They had the PvP, PvE, and the role-playing versions of those ones.
Yeah.
How does that sit now? What's the difference between back when it started and where we're sitting at now?
Well, now it's however many expansions we got later, and that like RP still exists, but PvP and PvE, that has been removed as of the current expansion.
Correct. So what they've done now is that essentially you get to choose whether you want to interact with other PvP players, or whether you just want to interact with the environment and not have to worry about facing off with other players as you're doing your normal questing and everything else, as you're doing those stuff. So what happens is that you can turn on what they call war mode. You have to be in your capital city. So for the Alliance, you need to be in Stormwind, and for the Horde, you need to be in Orgrimmar, and you can turn that on. Once you turn it on, you would then, if you turn it on, turn on PvP, then you are then free to be attacked by other players, and you can also attack those players that you are interacting with, of the opposing faction, obviously. And they also give you the incentive to turn on that war mode by giving you additional experience points. I think it's 10% additional, is it? I can't remember.
I'm not sure. I actually haven't looked much into it, to be honest, because I haven't really properly played PvP in like a long time. So
yeah, no, it's quite a substantial increase in incentive to get you to play it in war mode. And I know quite a lot of people turned it on when they were doing the pre-patch events for the current expansion that's coming out. And it was quite a bloodbath over on the Dark Shore. So it was good times by everybody, apparently. I haven't been game enough to turn it on myself, but I think it's going to be a success.
And what about if you're on a different server to one of your friends? So if I create my character on one of the servers and you're on a different server, are we able to play with each other, or how does that work?
Again, just back in the old days, if you were on one server, you could only interact with people on that particular server. Nowadays, what the technology that Blizzard uses, I don't claim to know how it works, but it's essentially cross realm type of event. So you can interact with other people from different servers. So, for example, if you're on a different server to me, we can group up together go into one group, and then we can then merge into. I don't know how they do it, but they merge you into the same shard or the same, I suppose, bubble, if you will, and then you become in the same environment. You become essentially a cross-server type matchup, and then you can interact, you can do whatever, even though you're from two different servers.
It's
altogether.
only in some zones, though. It's not everywhere.
No, you can't do it.
Yeah,
correct.
It's within server capacity, because it's some obviously areas are phased, so they can't actually have cross realm play, and there's still some limitations.
Yes, like some of the limitations you get, for example, is if you go into a raid, for example, you can kill the bosses, you can do everything together, but if one person picks up the loot and then another person is from a different server, sometimes you can't trade that piece of loot from one character to another if they are from different servers.
And unless it's changed in Battle for Azeroth, you can't send stuff cross realm.
Correct. There's something. Let me think. No, you can't send stuff cross realm, so you can't send money and that kind of stuff across to other people.
Or items.
Or items either. Correct.
Now, you touched on raids, and also you've got dungeons, which are a smaller version of those. Now, I remember back when Vanilla World of Warcraft came out, Raids were the big go at the very end because you got all the way to the end, you had to do something. You have the dungeons and the raids. How do they work?
Well, nowadays it still works the same, but a little bit differently. So, for example, you still, as you're leveling up to get to max level, you still go through. You can still do dungeons. There are 5-man or 5-person instances, if you will. So whereby you have 5 people going to a dungeon, you clear the bosses, you do whatever, and out you get pieces of loot, and then you work your way up to doing the raid bosses, which are obviously much bigger raids, up to 25 people. No, up to 30 people nowadays, I think you can do. But the big thing that Blizzard has done now is they've introduced what they call Mythic Plus dungeons. So essentially you're still doing the same 5-man dungeons, but with increased difficulties. And then with that, you can get better pieces of loot. And not only that, you get better achievements and things like that as well.
Yeah, it was essentially because people were clamoring for difficult 5-man content. Like that was always a complaint that people had. The dungeons were too easy. And so Blizzard is basically, for a while now, they've been slowly building up to the point where the difficulty can be scaled based on, I don't think it's necessarily your skill level, because like most modern players are a lot higher skill than vanilla players were back in the day. It's more a time, I think, constraint, because to be able to be, say, a mythic raider, which is essentially the highest difficulty, you need to you need to have a lot of free time, because you need to devote a lot of time to get to that level. Whereas if for lower difficulties, you slightly less time and right up until the lowest difficulty, which basically you can be logging in, an hour a week, and that still will allow you to experience the content.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Blizzard actually realize. Well, they obviously must realize. They must know their demographics and that stuff like that, of who their players are. And as I said, a lot of people have grown up. Well, have grown up with Warcraft. It's been World of Warcraft rather. It's been around for what, 15 years or 10? Yeah, coming up to 15, isn't it?
World of Warcraft? Well,
World of Warcraft,
it'll be,
yeah, 15
years now.
14,
so.
yeah, 15, yeah, we about 15 years now. So they've, what I was able to do 15 years ago, jump on there, play around, do whatever I needed to do. I could stay hours and hours and hours and play whatever. But nowadays, a bit more grown up, a bit more responsible. Sometimes you just want to jump in there, have a quick run at something. Half an hour is all you got.
Yeah.
You can do a Mythic Plus. You still get the gear. You still get the experience at some hard content, and you don't have to spend hours and hours in the raid.
There's always the elitist wankers that claim that like allowing the noob cakes to like actually experience the content was somehow like a bad thing.
Yeah, you get that. You do get that.
Fuck you guys. Like, yes, these people aren't going to experience things at the hardest difficulty, but not everyone can. That's the reality.
Correct, and just like they've done the dungeons are now you do the normal dungeons as you're leveling up. Once you hit max level, usually you do your normal heroic dungeons, and then you do your mythic, and the mythic pluses just keep adding. I think I can't remember what the highest level somebody completed was Mythic Plus 30 or something in the previous expansion in Legion. But generally speaking, anything 15 and above is considered hard.
Yes.
And
I think even after 11 is already.
Oh yeah, God, yes. Like in Legion, one of the achievements which I managed to get, and quite by fluke on it, because some lovely people managed to carry me through with my mage, was an achievement whereby you, with your artifact weapons, you could get one of your special appearances on the artifact weapon if you cleared a 15 plus mythic 15 plus on a dungeon, and you could get this achievement. And some lovely people carried me through because it was very, very hard to do. but worth it with that achievement. So, I mean, always something to do with the dungeons and stuff. So, good stuff.
I guess one of the things is that dungeons and raids, I guess when you talk about them on paper, essentially they're the same kind of thing. You get together, do a instance, and everyone gets a bit of loot here and there. What you can't describe on paper is the difference in experience between what a dungeon's like and a raid. A dungeon is such an elite little group of people. You may not know each other, but it's only a small group of people, and there's it's very reliant on each other. Raids, though, I mean, we talk back in Vanilla, you've had 40 people at once jumping in, everyone having to coordinate. You would have raid leaders to try and tell people where to go. You'd have very complex mechanics on how to beat each boss, and people would spend a whole night just to beat one boss. What's the experience that you guys remember with a raid specifically?
Like a particular raid, or you just mean like raiding in general?
No, raiding in general. What's your memories? What's your moments? What's the feel you got?
Well, I never raided in Vanilla because I basically didn't play Vanilla. I really only started right at the end of Vanilla. This is already just before, probably like a month maybe before Burning Crusade came out, which is the second expansion. BC I raided a bunch, but not at a very high level. Like I was basically like a backup DPS only. So it's really only when they needed someone to like fill a body, pretty much.
Well, I was lucky enough, unlucky enough, however you want to put it, to raid in Vanilla. I was actually in one of the pretty good, very good guild actually. We used to run 2 40-man raids throughout through the week, and like I would use my mage to run with one of them. So the 40-man instances.
Spam frostbolt and make water.
That's it. That's all you did. You jump in there. Oh, give us some food. That's it. You conjure up your food as a mage. And you couldn't just do the I know, right? You couldn't even just do the mage table. You had to give it out. Oh my god, painful. But I do remember the like doing Molten Core, for example. That used to take us all night, probably even 2 nights to complete the dungeon, the raid, because it was so complex. It was coordinating 40 people to run through that ridiculous
well,
raid.
Some of their dungeons were like Moradin, like
even
like
some of the dungeons were pretty correct.
Black
some
Rock
of the
depths or whatever, like they were like whole day affairs because they were so
yes, they
huge.
were. They were pretty big, and as I said, it was an experience. And then as I said, I had too much time on my hands anyway. I'd run it 4 days a week, so I'd do 2 days with my mage, and then 2 days with my druid, healing through it, and it was brilliant. Quite enjoyed it. It was actually, as I said, something new, something different, and it never got old, obviously. But towards the end of of Vanilla, everybody was burnt out, and then they introduced what was the last one they introduced? Naxxramas, which was. No, we never got through that at all because it was a bitch to get through.
Wasn't there some tuning issues when they initially released Nax?
Yes, there was. Once Nax, it was terrible. We could hardly do anything in there. We were brilliant. We managed to get Molten Core down, cleared it, no problem. What's the other one with Nefarian? Black Rock.
Depth?
No,
that's one of those.
Yeah, BRD, I think it was. Yeah. We cleared that, no problem. We started Anchorage, AQ20, AQ40, done them. Naxxramas came along, nothing. We could hardly get through it at all.
Was Nax the one with where paladins were super powerful for it?
Yes,
and then the horde always whinged because they had shamans.
They didn't have paladins. Yeah. Correct. That's it. And that was terrible. We hardly did anything. The guild store, everything stored. Everybody started whinging, carrying on, and then news came through from Blizzard that they were going to cut down in the Burning Crusade, they were going to cut the 40-man raids down to 25 man, and that pretty much killed our guild. So
Well, I mean, the reason they did that is because the problem with 40-mans was the just sheer difficulty of getting people together. Like, 40 people is a lot of people. And,
yes,
like, it's the organization that was the major problem. Like, I don't think many people look back at, like some people will say vanilla was harder, but it really wasn't. Like, people that actually look at the mechanics basically admit that mechanically the fights were a lot simpler.
yes,
Like, nowadays, an average lowest difficulty looking LFR raid is more complex from a mechanics point of view than some of the hardest raids from vanilla, where
I agree
the
with
bosses
that.
would have like 1 or 2 mechanics. It's simply because they had to rely on 40 people. And even Blizzard, I think, admitted that the way they tuned encounters was the intention was that only like 10 of those 40 had to know what they were doing, and everyone else can just sit there. And then itemization was completely broken as well, because it wasn't like a linear path like it is now, where it's like, oh yeah, this piece is clearly better than this piece is clearly better than that piece. It was all over the place. People would end up having their best in slots in some random 5-man that they had to run over and over. It's just, for everyone's fond memories of it, it was like, things are much better now.
Yeah, and that's the other thing which fascinates me, how everybody for some reason now is romanticizing vanilla and how they want vanilla servers and all this stuff,
Well,
and
they're
as if it was
coming. Vanilla servers are coming, but I
this is
reckon
this is the thing. Everybody's romanticizing as if it was the best time ever, as if it
I
was
think people are gonna have a shock
yeah, exactly, exactly right.
about how dumb a lot of it was. Even BC, which was a Far Cry beta, was still had a lot of problems with
Yeah,
the way that the raid scaling went and some of the
correct.
itemization. Like, I remember having to grind for intellect gear for my melee druid
Yes.
because of some stupid scaling system where, for some dumb reason, if you were a cat druid, your best DPS pieces generally had intellect on them as well. Which is insane to think about now, because it's almost it hasn't really been that way basically since, well, I think since Wrath they changed that pretty much.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like a big thing. It's like if you had to get maximum cat DPS for your druid, you had to make sure to get pieces of exactly equal intellect and agility, because they scaled in that way. There was even like math graphs about why that actually worked.
I think that's the thing about vanilla, and that is that I was glad to have experienced what it was like to remember and know where the game came from, to know the things that they did right, but also what they did wrong, and how complex they made things that shouldn't have been complex, and that back then we were able to do it. And that's something, and I think that's why people romanticize and want those servers, is because they remember, like, now we do, 10 men or 25 man stuff, but back then 40 of us did have to get together, and it wasn't easy because of how many people you needed and to coordinate them.
Yeah, they remember the romanticized feeling.
Yeah.
There's a YouTuber called Mike Preach Wow, and he did a bunch of retrospectives about like vanilla and BC and the old class designs, and
Yeah.
like one of the things he talks about is that despite knowing, because he was rating top level for like every single expansion, and he basically said like the mechanics were crap. Like no one honest would look at the current mechanics and the current raid design and go, oh, these are so shit comparing to vanilla. Like, that's bullshit.
Yeah, correct. I agree with you.
But what he says is that the feeling of 40 people screaming when you down that boss finally is not something that you've ever been able to replicate. Like, that's that's a unique memory that some people have experienced, and that's the thing that people are clamoring for, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think the game is in many ways better than it ever has been. So
Well, in saying that, like we talked about 40 versus 10 or 25 of that, how are guilds compared to what they were originally? Do they still sit in the same format, or have they changed a lot since the original vanilla World of Warcraft?
Guilds.
Guilds, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's guilds that are oriented towards PvP. There's guilds oriented towards like dungeoning. There's smaller guilds, bigger guilds. There's still like the elite of the elite guilds that like run for world first and things like that.
Yeah, the one thing that's changing in Battle for Azeroth is that Blizzard is introducing communities. Or do they call them Blizzard communities, or do they call them Battle.net communities? I can't remember which. So within your guild panel, you can actually connect community or create a community. And that community could be people who play Warcraft, or they could be other people who play other Blizzard games as well. And then you can have it's kind of like a Discord, almost like how Discord works, whereby you create a channel and people can come in there in that channel, and then you can interact with them, and you can have voice chat, you can have all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, Blizzard likes to steal good ideas and then make them into their own, and then put them into the game if they think it's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how good it is because I haven't played around with it yet, but it looks like as if that's what they're going towards, and trying to gather everybody into, I suppose, into one spot, and hopefully get people playing other games other than what they're already playing.
Yeah, I mean, their numbers show that like most people that play WoW are casual. I mean, I'm casual at this point as well, so
yeah.
Like one of the things that like, because the rise of the game was really interesting, right? Because you had so here's some interesting stats for you that should probably indicate it probably may give you a hint as to why Blizzard makes certain decisions. So like we know Vanilla raised beyond all expectations, right, in terms of player base.
Yep.
And BC continued the trend, and then Wrath, of course, was the peak, I think, at 12 million. But here's the interesting thing. So Blizzard, of course, aren't stupid, and they also keep stats. So after Wrath, what did we have as an expansion? We had Cataclysm.
Yeah.
Right? And Cataclysm, it's genuinely, like, it's not considered terrible, I don't think, but it's not as well regarded as other expansions. Certainly nowhere near as well regarded as Wrath was, right?
Yep.
And the main selling point of Cataclysm was like revamping essentially the vanilla leveling experience.
Yes, correct.
And part of the reason they did that is because Blizzard had stats that basically said that they had a particular big problem retaining players past like level 20 and level 30. So what they had found out is that they had actually... So more players had subscribed and then unsubscribed before they even hit level 30 than the entire population of WoW at that point. And this was happening all throughout Wrath of the Lich King. Even though they had a population of 12 million, which was their peak, they lost more than that in players, just of fresh subscriptions that just didn't stick to the game. Apparently, so, potentially they could have had a population of double that.
Yeah.
If those players would have actually been willing to stick with it. And part of the problem they realized is because the leveling experience was so shit. So that's the whole point of Cataclysm. They were like, well, how do we retain these, like, millions of players that aren't even continuing past level 20?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it kind of, like, is their, like, a lot of their decision-making is related to that. It's related to trying to retain player numbers, because heaps of people pick up the game very briefly and just drop it. They never go to that point, and that's part of the reason why they pushed for content that was not, like, they wanted to have content that was actually playable by everyone in the game, not just, like, elite players.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I've had a number of friends, even family members who've picked it up. Even my daughter, my daughter went past, she could go to level 60, maybe even 65, maybe.
Was it after Cataclysm?
Yes, it was after Cataclysm. So she applied it quite a fair bit, and her and her friends, and even with me, we just run around, carry on in dungeons and that kind of stuff. She quite enjoyed it, and then she just lost interest. So whether it was because she grew up and did girly things, I don't know. But she said she just suddenly, yeah, she just dropped it and hasn't picked it up since. But
Yeah. Well, they've
yeah.
pushed since then, yeah, all about player retention. Every single expansion, they kind of tweak things to make it slightly more palatable. Like, one of the things is that, of course, the game generally needed you to research things outside the game to understand how to do things
Yes.
inside the game.
Correct.
You know, this is how you had the WoW heads and the thought bots and all the resources that you required. Remember WoW movies, because WoW came out before YouTube.
Yeah.
So people had no idea how to do mechanics and raids. Essentially, they'd either brute force it, but this also were where the early resources were built around, because they were actually telling players, this is what you're supposed to do. These are the strategies that work. Very few players can do that. Everyone else was basically just copying. So Blizzard intentionally has made it so throughout the content experience of WoW, you as a player needed less and less external resources.
Yeah.
So you could look at an item and know that this was better for you so you didn't have to consult a fucking graph chart on elitist jerks explaining why 13 more intellect on this piece of gear is way better than the 15 more fucking stamina here. Like,
Yeah.
people kind of forget about this stuff, but like that I remember when my dad first started playing, and he was like a complete noob. I was slightly less of a noob, and I had to essentially teach him the basics of itemization, because he was pretty much just picking up he was still treating it like it was Diablo. So if the gear looked better,
Yes.
he'd just use it.
He just used it.
So he'd end up with pieces that were like completely not for his character.
Yeah.
You know, to the point where he'd be like an agility class and be using like intellect gear. You know that
Intellect.
classic noob thing? You know,
I know what you mean. Just because it's leather doesn't mean it's leather for you, you know?
yeah, and that was an experience players had. And of course, then you had a community that was like, lol, you fucking noob. Like, you know, various levels of accepting or not.
Yes, that's true.
So you can see like the design decisions that kind of made all throughout this history, and that kind of feeds into the expansion, all the expansions and how they release the content. And yeah, I mean, mind you, I like one of my probably my favorite expansion of is Mr. Pandaria, and it's because it's the one where they streamlined a bunch of things that I thought were already pointless around Cataclysm.
Yeah.
I'm like, to me, it doesn't hurt the game in any way, because the hard content is still there, which is a lot of people were complaining about that. Oh, just making the game too easy. But the reality is that if you play the game on the hardest difficulty, it is not too easy.
No, it is not too easy at all.
But you have to be willing to put in the time to do that, of course.
Yeah. And some people are right into that, and they, more power to them. It's those jerks who try to put down everybody else just because they can do it, and they think, oh no, it's too easy, blah blah blah. Everybody else, they put down everybody else, and they'll put down Blizzard saying, oh, making things too easy. It's not. It's not easy at all.
Isn't that what PvP is there for? That you can take it out on the other players?
Yeah, but even PvP is going through like massive changes, because like Blizzard had this intention to try and make it into an esport, and then it was too chaotic, and
Yeah.
there's a whole thing, because like if you watch like even arena battles, it's a very hard thing to pay attention to. So Blizzard like intentionally tried to slow it down, because they realized like, because matches in arena could be like seconds long. So then they tried to tweak it to make it minutes, which then it became even longer because it emphasized healers. It's a whole like thing.
Yeah, it is. It's because and that's the thing. It's hard to make it as an esport. There's so many nuances that go into the things you do, the abilities you use, and it's hard to demonstrate it to the casual viewer, to translate that to make it an
Plus
interesting
balancing
view.
those million of classes.
Yeah, correct. So it's not an easy thing to make into an esport, and that I don't know. I don't think it's as successful as some of the other games they've got.
Nah, definitely not. But I mean,
Yeah.
of course, to me, the heart of PvP in WoW is battlegrounds. Like that.
Oh
That
yeah.
to me is like doing, Alterac Valley was the shit. It's a little bit more streamlined than it used to be.
Than it used to be.
Of
Oh God, I
course.
used to spend hours in that thing.
Yeah. Well, I think what's the longest, like 40-hour Alterac Valley or something like that, where it goes
Yeah.
for days and it'd be the same battle because you just come in and come out because it never
Yeah.
actually ended. It's like a
No,
stalemate.
I can recall my longest AV battle would have been probably closer to 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
It's the longest I've ever been. I gave it up after that. I couldn't do it anymore.
I remember grinding High Warlords gear in like was it High Warlords or it was Gladiator gear in
Gladiator.
BC because I wanted to raid,
Yeah.
but I didn't have like my eye level was like my items were not powerful enough, so I had to grind PvP gear to be competitive to be put on like the second roster.
Yeah.
Man, that was a lot of hours.
Alterac Valley for me though was probably my favorite part of the PvP thing because all the other maps they were pretty much just literally player versus player, but Alterac Valley had so much going on for it. You had to go to the mines and take over the mines. You could summon the big elemental to smash everyone up if the game was taking that long. Like the original days of Alterac Valley,
Yeah.
like these days, or at least last time I played, it'd be a quick battle and, someone would just go straight through the other one. But back in those original ones where you did have hour-long battles, that was where you'd spend all that time at the back, getting all those resources, doing the summons, and then just waiting for that elemental to come through and just destroy everyone. And like there was an achievement to that. It wasn't just I'm going to beat this other person. It was this whole I can contribute even if I'm not the best player.
Yeah, but saying that, but people still essentially treated it like it was a one-on-one fight rather than a actual, like, people still to this day don't do the actual objectives in PvP.
In PvP,
That's a
correct.
That's a common problem. It's like a psychology. Just players are just dumb forever. That's
No, I agree. I mean, sometimes you go into Warsong Gulch or anything like that, and they're just right in the middle of battling it out, whatever, and somebody's carrying the flag. One or two people are actually playing it properly, and then there's just these people banging their heads together. It's just funny to see sometimes.
Yeah, well, I love Battlegrounds. Like that was my favorite PvP experience.
Yeah.
But even modern Battlegrounds are a lot of fun. Like they're quite fast paced. They're much more arcadey. But they're a lot of fun when they work well, when players actually like do the objectives. They definitely have their kind of structure. But mind you, I essentially have not touched PvP in all of Legion. So I couldn't tell you how it is now. But I am planning to do it in Battle for Azeroth. So
Yeah. I mean, with Battle for Azeroth, they're introducing a few things. Warfronts, I think they're introducing, which
yeah,
is now I can't remember if is Warfronts PvP or is it PvE? I can't remember. Or are those the
I think Island Expeditions.
Island expeditions are the PvE?
Yeah,
Yeah. They're saying that they're introducing a new class of I suppose smarter NPCs that make the scenarios a lot more complex, if you will. And the scenarios change all the time. So you travel to an island, for example, and the scenarios change. So either you meet the same creatures, but they're in different configurations, or they're in different spots, or in different whatever. So it makes it more interesting in theory, instead of just being the same static map that you have to deal with.
yeah. So Warfronts are PvE.
Yeah, they're the PvE one.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the islands. Yeah, that must be the PvP one.
One of the things I remember when I used to play, leveling a character, I would always try and do a little bit of questing and a little bit of PvP. And especially between level, I think it's 10 to 19, you used to always find those characters, I believe they used to call them Twinks, that would deliberately sit in a low bracket with the best gear just to destroy that PvP. Are they still around? Is Twink still a thing?
No, because you can't itemize in that way, and you level through PvP anyway.
You could turn it off. I believe you could turn off your leveling so you could stay in that bracket.
You could before.
You
I don't
could
think you
before,
can
and
anymore,
that's the
can
thing.
you?
I'm not sure if you can turn it off anymore. But I do remember exactly what you're saying. You used to get the Twink, level 19 usually. So you don't click over to 20. You stay at 19, get all the
Yeah,
best
it was
advantage, and it, yeah.
Because actually now it's all scaled also, because so you can't really twink because
Yes, everything is scaled. Yes, I
yeah, so
remember now.
even if you did like the equivalent difference between 19 and like or lower wouldn't matter enough for it
No,
to
correct.
change how you'd have to itemize and everything. I remember grinding actually Shadowfang Keep to get the Assassin's Blade because that was like the twink item for level 19 rogue. So I remember doing that. It would sell for 100 gold, which was a fucking shitload at the time.
Yes.
I think I only managed to pull one of the whole time I was grinding Shadowfang Keep for it.
Yeah. Oh my God. See, the biggest thing I'm doing at the moment is collecting mounts, and one of the great things that Blizzard have done over the with the new expansion. So, it's still a debate over whether it's a good thing or not. I personally don't mind it. Everything is personal loot. And then what did they do with the legacy items? So when you're doing a dungeon 10 levels or lower than you, 10 levels or lower? Actually, it's 11 items or lower than you. What I can't remember. But what it does is that it allow you basically you go into an old dungeon or an old raid, and you get. So if you run it as a 25-man raid, for example, it's just you, obviously, because you're powered enough to do it yourself. You get 25 man's worth of loot just for you. So it makes it a lot easier to collect things for transmogs and as well as mounts and toys or whatever.
Well, that makes sense because I don't want to like screw around with the scaling because the I think they also do that on purpose because of the fuck, I completely forgot what they call it, like the stat squish.
Oh yes, they did do the stat squish, didn't they?
Yeah, well they've done it twice now. They originally did it in Mr. Pandaria.
Yes.
And now they did it again for Battle for Azeroth, just because the numbers were getting stupid. And of course, I think it's partially also just to save computation, because like it's just it's probably a lot of extra work for a CPU to calculate like 5 billion instead of 50. So
yeah,
it's really just saving their own probably bandwidth and computational power. But like it's a bit wonky now. But
yeah, at the moment it does look a bit wonky. It's not quite as balanced as it could be.
No, but I mean that's inevitable. I think they need to do a fucking level squish at this point.
Yeah.
Because grinding 100, well, it's not really grinding, but like leveling 120 to 120 is fucking nuts.
No, it's not easy.
Levels. Like even as streamlined as it is now, and you could do it in multiple ways, it's still a fucking lot of levels. Like that's, if they can squish it down to maybe like 70 or 60 even, or maybe 80, and actually go back to the old system of doing 5 levels per expansion maybe rather than 10. I never understood why they got rid of that.
Yeah, because I remember one of the questions, one of these Q&A for developers, they did one last week before, and somebody did ask that question about level squish, and Blizzard said that they have thought about it, they have discussed it, but they haven't opted to do it just yet.
It would take a lot of work, I think.
Yeah.
That's ultimately the problem, because they'd probably have to time it. They'll probably have to alternate the timing away from the stat squish.
Yes.
I don't think they can do a stat squish and a level squish all in once. So they'd probably so they've done the stat squish this expansion, so maybe a level squish next expansion.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea, because I mean, what are we gonna look at next time? 130?
Yeah, that's kind of nuts.
That's ridiculous.
It's funny because I remember people going, "Oh, 100. They'll wait till 100, and then WoW will be over." I'm like, really? It's just a number, bro. It doesn't matter. I know it sounds nice because it's nice and round, but They're gonna keep going until they bleed the fucking thing dry. If they get to level 200 and the game is still successful,
They'll keep on
they'll
going.
keep going. Yeah. What expansion is EverQuest up to now? Like the 20th? Like
That's a good question, that.
the game's still running. It's not dead.
All right, well, we're getting closer to the end of this episode. We've talked a little bit about the new expansion, Battle for Azeroth. What should people expect going into this one?
More of the same. Oh, can I rant about the fucking theme? Can I please?
Always. It's not an episode if you don't rant about something, so go for it.
All right.
Go for it.
I think so. We kind of didn't really go over the story because we kind of talked about mechanics and sort of the general kind of progress of the World of Warcraft. But like obviously, you know, if you want to give it a brief rundown. So Warcraft 3 finishes. We beat the Legion. World of Warcraft comes out. It's all like wow. Let's explore everything. Big world. Big bad guys kind of there, but they're kind of leftovers. BC has Illidan, then you got Wrath, which has got the big Lich King reveal and the final of that. Then you got Cataclysm, where Deathwing comes back and everyone teams up to kill him. Mists of Pandaria comes out and it's supposed to be this revamping of the Horde and Alliance fight, which was okay. I mean, I loved Siege of Orgrimmar, personally, and Garrosh is a compelling asshole. I like it. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I like Mist of Pandaria, but it wasn't for the supposed refreshing of the Horde and versus Alliance type thing.
Yeah, it was supposed to be that in an adventure.
It was supposed to be that, but there's more other aspects of the game I loved more than that, because I didn't think that part of it worked as well as it should have.
Then you had the weird Warlords time travel fuckwank, which I think everyone probably at this point just wants to forget ever existed.
Yeah.
Even though it led directly to Legion, because they, of course, didn't have a live Gul'dan in the main universe, so they had to fucking time travel him into our... It's a whole thing. Anyway. So now, we've got... Because, of course, we've just killed basically the biggest bad guy of the universe.
Yes.
Well, we haven't killed him officially, but, like, he's basically a non-threat at this point. He stabbed the world with a giant fucking sword. Great. And now we're going back to this stupid, bloody Horde v Alliance conflict, which I don't really think the player base really gives a shit about anymore. Like, I don't understand why they keep trying to push this stupid theme. Like, okay, look, I get it. Warcraft, haha, it's in the name. But, come on, guys. Like, does anyone actually give a crap about the Horde v Alliance battle anymore? Do we, especially when you've got this whole situation with Sylvanas, who's, again, we're just doing Garrosh 2.0. Like, that's what it feels like.
So what would you like to see?
I would honestly rather just jump straight into another big bad, make it the Void Lords, make it the Old Gods, which I guess is where they're kind of pushing everything anyway. This is the problem. Like, my issue is that it does not feel very satisfying thematically. Because it's either going to be Sylvanas is an evil bitch. She burned down, the Night Elves' tree and basically killed a bunch of civilians. And she'll probably do worse things. Alternatively, it can be an ass pull. And it'll be like, oh, the Old Gods did it. It's all the Old Gods. It's all Old Gods corruption. Everyone's evil just because of the Old Gods. And it's like, that's not really particularly satisfying either. Because Blizzard, when they had this situation with Garrosh, essentially made sure that you were like, no, Garrosh is doing it because Garrosh is an asshole. He's not doing it because he's a corrupt blah blah. He's just doing it because he's a jerk. And that's what he wants to do. Yeah. Even though they fucked up their own writing internally, but that's another story. Even so, like, I don't understand why we're having the same exact theme that we had 2 expansions ago. Like, it's like, what, are we a fucking memory so short that we don't remember that they sold Mists of Pandaria in exactly the same way they're trying to sell Battle for Azeroth? Oh, we're going to ramp up the Horde v Alliance? Like, yeah, we know that. You did that 2 expansions ago. What's your fucking point?
The only thing I'm thinking is that there's got to be something more to it going on. But saying that, though, with every hint that they've dropped, it is suggestive that it will most likely be the Old Gods, which, as you said, is not satisfying either.
No,
The
'cause
way
it's
they
an
have done
ass
it.
pull.
Yes.
Then it makes it seem like no one's really in control of anything, and it's just a
Yes.
huge waste of time. Like, my interpretation was like, okay, so where's the end goal here? So, okay, the old god's blah, but what's like, again, the Horde players are complaining that the Horde is, again, just the bad guys. And Alliance players are complaining that they're, again, put on the sidelines, just reacting to whatever the Horde's
To whatever the Horde are doing. Yes.
which makes sense. Like, it's a fucking annoyance from both angles if you're interested in, like, a thematically interesting story. And then on top of that, having it be pulled out from everyone after all that, when Ashara comes, inevitably it's revealed that Enzoth has a bloody involvement with it. Just like, come on, guys, can't we do something a bit more interesting?
Yeah, I mean, like,
Especially because Sylvanas has already died twice.
no, has she died
No,
twice or
three
three
times.
times? 3 times. That's what I was thinking.
Because she
3
dies
times.
the first time, she gets turned into a banshee. She comes back and grabs her own body, rebels against Arthas, kills the Lich King, jumps off Ice Crown because I have nothing to live for anymore. Gets resurrected by the Valkyr, and then in Cataclysm she gets killed again in the fucking Silverpine Forest zone
Yeah.
by the Worgen.
Yep, she
And
died.
then she gets resurrected again. It's like, come on, bitch, do you ever learn?
Oh my goodness. Yes, no. We'll see how it goes. Look, I'm reserving judgment. Maybe something interesting will come along. But at the moment, the way the story is playing out, it is same old, same old. It is different. Things have changed. I mean, like, spoiler alert. I mean, obviously the world tree is burnt down, so Dionysus is burnt. So, and the Alliance is about to attack Lordaeron. That will be happening when? This week? Next week?
Well,
No, this week.
Yeah, it's next week. When the expansion goes live, essentially, right? Or just before?
No, see, this week they're gonna no. If you see the cinematic for Old Soldier,
Yeah, that's just
That-
before the battle. For
that's
Azeroth.
just before the battle, and then I
Ah.
believe
Not the
this
Battle
week,
for Azeroth,
yeah, battle. No,
Siege
you know,
of
yeah,
Lordaeron.
battle for Lordaeron, yeah, or Siege of Lordaeron. And then this week, most likely, with the way they've been doing their cinematics, most likely they're gonna drop the cinematic for Ashara, because there's her cinematic yet to come.
Ashara's coming.
Yeah, and then I don't know how that's gonna tie in with anything, because I understand the one they did for Jaina, I understand the one they did for Sylvanas.
Well, I was ranting to my friend about this as well, and I find Ashara to be like the least interesting of the like bad guys from
Yes.
the Warcraft universe. Like, she to me is a mid-tier raid boss, which is exactly what she's gonna be, because she's
Yeah, correct.
literally a mid-tier raid boss.
That's it. There's nothing fascinating or interesting about her. She's not a threat. She's somebody else's puppet. She's not
Yeah.
actually, you know what I mean.
She's supposed to be this super powerful elf queen mage, like the most powerful, to the point where like Manaroth was apparently scared of her, whatever. But she just feels like she's always been just that kind of background bad guy everyone's waiting for.
Yeah.
But it's not as thematically interesting as I think others have been in the past.
Yes. So, and again, towards the end, I very much doubt that Sylvanas will be the end boss at something like Garrosh was.
Well, that would literally just be Miss Pandaria.
That would just be a copy. I don't think they're gonna do it that way.
Misty, battly, Azerothian panda allied race time. Like, that's...
But look, I'm looking forward to BFA. I think it's gonna be not necessarily from the way the storyline is going, because as I said, I'm still reserving judgment on that one. But I'm still interested in it. I'm still gonna play it. I'm still gonna love it.
Oh, I'm still gonna play it because I'm a fucking fanboy and I'll
Yeah.
eat the shit
I know, right?
from the bottom of their shoes. But that's
Yeah, they say, here you go, eat it up, and
yeah.
we're
I'll still
gonna
complain
love it up.
about it. I'm like, well, this shit tastes slightly worse than the previous shit. So
And that's the problem, as I said. Legion was so good for me. Haven't enjoyed Warcraft as much as I did. Well, Wrath of the Lich King, I really, really loved it. Mist of Pandaria, I liked it. It was great. But Legion has been brilliant. It's been the best since Wrath for me.
what's
And
your
then-
order of actually expansion quality Come on, go on. I want to know.
Quality. Ooh,
Like
that's a
favorite
big
to
call.
least favorite, let's say.
Okay, favorite to least favorite. Wrath of the Lich King has always been my favorite. Legion is my second favorite. Uh, Burning Crusade, Vanilla, Cataclysm. Oh no, not Cataclysm. Burning Crusade, Mists, Vanilla, Cataclysm, and then Draenor has
Yeah.
always been last.
I think everyone's gonna put Draenor last.
Yeah,
But here's the
Draenor,
thing,
Cataclysm.
Draenor, rating
Draenor, no,
was amazing
no,
by and large.
yes, no. I actually enjoyed. What's that last? What's the last raid in Draenor?
Well,
I
it's not
can't
the
remember.
last one. I think Blackrock Foundry. That's the fucking best raid in Warlords of Draenor. Like fighting Blackhand and Operator Thagosh, that was the shit.
Yes, that was it. Yes, that was a really good one.
That's
a really
easily
good
one
one.
of the best raids Blizzard has ever designed, and it came out probably of one of the worst expansions.
Yes. Hellfire Peninsula is the other one. Hellfire Peninsula.
well,
I was
that was
just
the last
Peninsula.
one.
Hellfire Citadel. That was the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was okay. I liked it less than Blackrock Foundry.
No, Blackrock Foundry is brilliant. I remember. Yes, the way the whole raid is designed. It was really good.
Yeah.
All right, I might rein it in there because otherwise
No,
we're going to go for
please.
another hour.
I think we can.
We
we?
could easily go for another fucking hour. I didn't even do my breakdown of like expansions. Fuck you, man.
Quick, go. quick rundown. Go for it.
All right.
Do it.
Well, the lowest is Draenor despite the rating. Then probably Kata. I really didn't like Cataclysm that much, despite it having goblins and Worgen, which I was going to be really excited about. Then actually Wrath. I never actually thought Wrath was that great. Then probably BC. Then Legion.
Yep.
Then Mists. Mist is easily one of the best, I think. And what did I miss? Did I miss anything?
No.
No, I think that's all of them.
No. Did you say BC?
Yeah, BC is
Yeah, you
like
did.
between. It's just before Mists,
Yeah.
but slightly above Wrath. Like I consider
Yes.
BC and Wrath very close to one another
They were pretty close to each other. Yes.
in terms of
They were-
quality. Even though like most people would probably say Wrath is much better. Certainly the player numbers would indicate Wrath is the best expansion.
Yeah, no, I loved Wrath. It was brilliant. I did so much in that expansion. So much. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, well I think that's all of them, and we'll see what happens to Battle for Azeroth. As I said, I'm thematically not looking forward to it, but hopefully all the gameplay stuff is actually good. And I mean, one of the other sad things is, of course, it's coming out like 2 months too early. Like that's a bit of a problem.
Yes, I agree with you. That is a bit early.
Like it's some parts of it are still in beta essentially. Like
Yeah, I think I think it feels a bit rushed.
yeah, well the class design, like Blizzard admitted that some of the classes are essentially not going to be done until the first patch.
Yeah. So
Which
that's
is-
not good. That's not a good thing at all.
No, it's a bit far cry from traditional Blizzard, or like it'll be ready when it's ready.
Correct. Correct. And they usually delay things just to make sure it's perfect. And now
Yeah.
they're just saying, yeah, okay, we'll just release
Well,
it.
I think they probably know something about player numbers that maybe other people don't, and that's ultimately the big.
They probably
deciding-
would. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Maybe
and I
that
agree
2
with you.
months makes such a huge difference that they're willing to take the hit on the quality.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Anyway, I don't
no.
want to sort of negative the whole thing because I'm still looking forward to the expansion. It's just I have like these niggling negative doubts in my head about it from a thematic point of view.
Yeah, nah, it's all good, man. I think it's gonna be a good expansion. Just don't know how good it will and where it will rank compared to the rest of them.
Well, we should do a retrospective maybe at the end.
Yeah, we should. I agree.
And see, like right at the end of Battle for Azeroth, we'll meet up and see if things have panned out. Particularly I'm curious about the story. I'm curious if every bullshit cliche is gonna come true.
Yeah.
Or if they're gonna actually do something unexpected.
We shall see, I'm sure.
Too easy. All right. Well, thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Cav, for joining us once again. For everyone listening, we'd love the feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Grab us on Reddit or Facebook just to drop us a comment. But if there's any further topics of that you guys would like, please let us know. Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode. We'll catch you on the next one.
Catch you on the flip side.
Later.